Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in for today's video. I am here today with a reading progress video / April wrap up and what's on my TBR for May and June. Mostly May, because the books that I'm reading now, I'm starting at the end of April and will be reading until the first couple weeks of May. The first book is Jeanette McCurdy's new book, Half His Age. I gave her memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died, 3.5 stars, and I'm excited to watch the TV show of it on Apple TV with Jennifer Aniston. So this book was for my student teacher romances TBR that I had in February and March, and this was on my backlog list of holds from the library. It came out on January 20th. I started it yesterday, and I am on chapter 19, page 62. The chapters in this book are really short, so I have a feeling I'm going to get through it quickly. If I don't DNF it first, because so far I'm doing okay with the sexually explicit scenes, but if it gets to be too much, then I will stop. The next new release that I'm reading is Something Wicked by Fallon Ballard. I have read 2 other books by her called I thought there was a list. Okay, I have read by her All I Want Is You and Right on Cue, and next I'm planning to read Just My Type. This is supposed to be a retelling of Wicked and Phantom of the Opera, from what I understand. I started it on Tuesday, and I am on chapter 23, page 250. The uprising has overthrown Avon's maniacal rulers, and a decrease has been issued. Candidates for the first presidential election will be selected by the competition of a special task, killing the former monarch of their home province. Callum, the son of the recently dethroned king, is determined to be in the running, but coming to terms with patricide will require the help of Lady Catherine, a gifted courtesan at La Puissance, Avon's premier sex club. Lady Catherine has always had the magical ability to manipulate the emotions of anyone which experiences an orgasm in her presence. If Callum can only open up to Kate, he will be able to commit to the newly fated murder without suffering the guilt and taking his place as the rightful candidate from his province. But Callum has a deep-seated mistrust of the gifted, and the last thing he expects is to be confronted by an undeniable connection with Kate that neither of them understands or wants. With the fate of the country at stake, Callum and Kate search for ways to bear themselves to each other and discover a darker force building within La Puissance, on one that might ruin the future of Avon forever. To stop Avon from falling to ashes, they must sacrifice everything to have, even if it requires betraying each other. The next book that I finished reading is called As Long As You Loathe Me by Swathi Hedge. So this title is obviously a play on words of the Backstreet Boys song As Long As You Love Me, and I'm all here for it. It focuses on Mira and Lucy. This book focuses on Mira and Lucy, and it's an enemies to lovers romance that focuses on a cheerleader and a geek. So, like, it's Ross and Rachel from Friends, but only they're lesbian. So I really enjoyed this book. This was the first time I ever read a book by this author, and she has also written a couple of other romances called Match Me If You Can and Can't Help Faking in Love, so I will definitely be checking those out next. The next book is a historical fiction called Miss Morgan's Book Brigade, New York Times bestselling author of the Paris Library. I heard about this book from Tori at A Novel Life, and this is a World War II romance about it's set in World War I, which I don't read a lot of World War I romances. And the second timeline is set in 1987 when I was 3. 1918, as the Great War rages, Jesse Carson takes a leave of absence from the New York Public Library to work for the American Committee for Devastated France. Founded by millionaire Anne Morgan, this international group of women help rebuild devastated French communities just miles from the front lines. Upon arrival, Jessie arrives to establish something that the French have never seen: children's libraries. She turns ambulances into bookmobiles and trains the first French female librarians. Then she disappears. When aspiring writer Wendy Peterson stumbles across a passing reference to Jessie Carson while working in the archives at the New York Public Library, she becomes consumed with learning about her fate. In her obsessive research, Wendy discovers that she and the elusive librarian have more in common than their work at New York's famed library, but that she has no idea that their paths will converge in surprising ways across time. Based on the extraordinary, little-known history of these women who received the Croix de Guerre Medal for courage under fire, Miss Morgan's Book Brigade is a tribute to the resilience of the human spirit, the power of literature, and ultimately the courage it takes to make a change. This book was fabulous. I really loved this author's writing style. This is my first book by her, and I am planning to look for the Paris Library at the library next, and I believe I saw it at the same shelf for National Library Week books, so I will be getting that the next time I go to the library. The next book is Lucy Score's new release from March 11th called Mistakes Were Made. This is the second book in this series with Story of My Life, and the third book is going to be coming out next year, and it will be called Just One More Chapter, that focuses on Levi. And this has really good disability representation for ADHD, which is told from Lucy Score's own the character's name is Zoe, but in her author's note, Lucy Score mentions that she also has ADHD, and her character's quirks are based on how she manages her disability, which I really, really liked a lot. So far, this series has gotten 4.5 stars per book. The first book was 4.5 stars, and so is this one. So I can't wait for book 3 to come out, whenever that will be. The next book that I am reading, the last book that I finished reading last week was called The Last Letters of Sally and Walter by Cammie McGovern. This is another new author to me that I found in the adult fiction section at the library. This is about 2 senior citizens named Sally and Walter who are in a Scrabble club at their nursing home, and their romance is very, very adorable. To answer the discussion questions, at what age do you start to feel old? Is the number difference between men and women? How much do societal expectations and norms influence what the numbers may be? So, okay, I'm gonna say my age here, and it's 40. Do I feel old? No. I actually constantly get complimented that I look younger than I am. The youngest I have been told I look is 17, which is pretty impressive. The next question I'm going to answer is, do you play Scrabble or other board games? What don't you like about them? So when my family and I go on vacation to our beach house, I always play Scrabble with my mother and my sister, and I'm getting better at it. But my mom always seems to come up with the best words, followed by my sister. The final discussion question I'm going to answer is, are there new technologies that baffle you? How good are you adapting to new technology? I would say I'm pretty good at adapting to new technology. I mean, I feel like the thing that I need to adapt to currently is AI, which I'm not a big fan of because I've been hearing a lot that it could eliminate people's jobs. And as a person who's a receptionist who answers phones, I get worried that my job will eventually get taken away by AI. This book got 5 stars. The next book is The Irish Goodbye by Heather Amy O'Neill. This was on the adult fiction shelf at the library that's outside of the teen section. And this book was hyped up at the end of last year. A couple of people that I follow on BookTube mentioned it in their end of the year wrap-up videos, so I decided to pick it up. This is a family drama that focuses on an Irish family. Their name is the Ryan sisters. The 3 sisters are named Kate, Alice, and Maggie. And I really love the dynamic between the 3 of them. And the drama happens when the younger sister brings an unknown person to Thanksgiving dinner. And I should have really read this during Thanksgiving, so I think I'm going to reread this again in November. I gave this book 4.5 stars. The next book I am currently in the middle of is 100 Summers by Beatrice Williams. This is my first book by this author. The only other book that she has out is called Overseas. I heard about this book on Instagram because I am always looking for new books to read that are based off of the Friends characters. This was on a recent Instagram post that I found, and this book describes Rachel. And this is a perfect book to read when you're at the beach. Right now I am not at the beach, but I will probably take this to the beach with me when I go on vacation at the end of July and read it again. I started this book last Tuesday, and I am currently on page 213, chapter 16. Lily Dane has returned to Seaview, Rhode Island, where her family has summered for generations. It's an escape, not only from New York's social scene, but from a heartbreak that still haunts her. Here, some among a seaside community that has embraced her since childhood. She finds comfort in the family rituals of summer. But this summer is different. Budgie and Nick Greenwald, Lily's former best friend and former fiancé, have arrived too, and Seaview's elite are abuzz. Under Budgie's glamorous influence, Lily is seduced into a complicated web of renewed friendship and dangerous longing. As a cataclysmic hurricane turns north through the Atlantic and uneasy secrets slowly reveal themselves, Lily and Nick must confront an emotional storm that will change their worlds forever. So I am choosing to connect this book to the episode at the end of season 3 where they all go to the beach so Phoebe can meet her birth mom. And there is drama between Rachel, Ross, and Bonnie. And I don't know what I'm going to give this book for a rating yet because I'm only like 47% done. The next book I'm reading, I borrowed from my neighbor Kathleen. It is the final book in the Cuban Saga series by Chanel Clayton. I started this series in January, and I'm very sad to see it end. This is a series of historical fiction books that are based upon a family called the family tree should be in the back of the book. I thought it was. Or maybe it's in the front. The first book in the series was called Next Year in Havana, and it was a Reese's Book Club pick in 2018 when it was released. New York heiress Catherine Dohan seemingly has it all. There's only one problem. It's a lie. As soon as Morro Castle leaves port, Catherine's past returns with a vengeance and threatens her life, joining forces with the charismatic jewel thief. Catherine must discover who wants her dead and why. Elena Palacio is a dead woman, or so everyone thinks. After a devastating betrayal left her penniless and on the run, Elena's journey on the Morro Castle is her last hope. Steeped in secrecy and a burning desire for revenge, her return to Havana is a chance to right the wrong that has been done to her, and her prey is on the ship. As danger swirls aboard the Morro Castle and their fates intertwine, Elena and Catherine must risk everything to see justice served once and for all. And here are the blurbs on the back. Clayton does it again with the Cuban heiress, exploring the explosive encounter between New York heiress Catherine Dolan and the young Cuban lady Elena Palacio. But neither woman is exactly who they pretend to be, and the journey threatens them both as they risk their lives to pursue justice. Marie Benedict, New York Times bestselling co-author of The Personal Librarian, serves us a delicious slice of vengeance as two women risk everything for justice. The backdrop of the SS Morro Castle unfolds a chapter of history that is little known and brings the harrowing journey of the fateful voyage to life. A fabulous, gripping read. Madeline Martin, New York Times bestselling author of The Librarian Spy. A tense, compelling thriller in which we are never sure who is the hunter and who is the hunted. Rhys Brown, New York Times bestseller of Peril in Paris. I haven't heard of these other two books. I was not a huge fan of The Personal Librarian. So in this book, I am only on chapter 8, page 84. So the most interesting thing about this series is one of the last books I read was set during the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s. And I remember way back in 8th grade, we studied the 1960s for a whole entire week. And the Cuban Missile Crisis was one thing that we talked about. But we didn't really learn a lot about how this affected the people who actually lived in that country. So that what has been so interesting about that series. That was discussed in The Most Beautiful Girls in Cuba, which I read at the beginning of March. I just finished rereading Our Last Days in Barcelona last week. And as I just said, this is the last book in the series. Can I answer a discussion question? Probably not. Not yet. That will be answered in another blog post. The next book is on my July TBR for Manhattan to Stars Hollow. This is called Till Summer Do Us Part by Megan Quinn, the same author as How My Neighbor Stole Christmas, Merry Christmas, You Filthy Animal, and Just for the Cameras. Her books have really gotten mixed reviews from me. So far, I'm really liking this one. I started it last Tuesday, and I am on chapter 16, page 200. So this book focuses on Scotty Price, who just started a new job, and she's the only woman on a team filled with brides and chads. Expecting a bachelor pad atmosphere, she is quickly corrected when she finds out everybody is happily married. In an effort to impress her boss, Scotty mentions her non-existent husband in a company meeting, but eagle-eyed Chad points out her lack of wedding ring. Panicked, Scotty creates a story about her unhappy marriage. Unfortunately for Scotty, her boss has a solution, a one-on-one session with the best marriage counselor in the Northeast, who happens to be her boss's husband. With no way out of her lies, Scotty agrees to see him. Frantic, she calls in help from her best friend, who sets her up with her brother, an improv-obsessed millionaire. Enter Wilder Wells, more than happy to take on the job. He teaches Scotty the main rule of improv. Always say yes, but the rule backfires during a session when Wilder signs them up for an 8-day summer marriage camp with all of Scotty's coworkers, where she'll have to share a cabin with her way too handsome fake husband. I am so enjoying this book. The relationship buildup between Scotty and Wilder is much more believable than the couple from either Merry Christmas, You Filthy Animal or Just for the Cameras. And this book actually reminds me of The Parent Trap, although there are no kids involved, but it's a summer camp for adults, which is a lot of fun. The next book I just picked up from the library yesterday. It's a small book of poetry called Lunch Poems by Frank O'Hara. I haven't started it yet, but I'm going to read a poem a night to subset all of the other longer books that I'm reading for variety. The next book I'm reading is Supernatural Nevermore by Keith R.A.D. Candido. So this book is set during the in-between moments of the season 2 Supernatural episodes Crossroad Blue and Cross Station. I started this at the beginning of March, and I am only on chapter 14, page 205. So Supernatural is a show about vampire hunters that I used to watch when I was in college. It stars Jared Padalecki from Gilmore Girls, Sam Winchester, and this is his brother Dean. I can't remember the actor's name. But Gabby Reeves reviewed this in one of her reading vlogs from March or February, and she gave it 3 stars. I'm honestly probably going to give it the same rating. The next book I am reading is A Stage Set for Villains by Shannon J. Spann. This is a new release that came out a couple of months ago. It's basically a YA version of If We Were Villains by ML Rio. So if you have teenagers who are into theater, they will love this book. If you are an adult like me who loves theater, especially Shakespeare, please read If We Were Villains by ML Rio. This book also would pair up nicely with the movie The Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams in it. I just started this book yesterday after I picked it up from the library, and I am on Act 1, Scene 7, page 97. The next book is C.G. Drew's new release from last Halloween called Hazelthorn. This is a gothic horror book that is set in a mansion, and it focuses on two characters named Evendear and Byron. And this is basically a gothic retelling of The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Matt and I saw the play last month at City Theater in Biddeford. I just started this book this morning, and I am on... Actually, I started it yesterday afternoon. I am on page 110, chapter 11. The next book is the latest release from the latest YA release from Alexis Henderson, who also wrote An Academy for Liars, House of Hunger, In the Year of the Witching. I have read 2 of those. I gave An Academy for Liars 4.5 stars, and House of Hunger 2.5 stars. DNF at 42%. I still need to read The Year of the Witching. In this book, we meet Rosalind and Adeline. Rosalind isn't herself anymore. It's been almost a year since her sister Adeline died under mysterious circumstances, and Rosalind is tormented by her absence. So when the caravan of girls that Adeline spent her last summer with rolls back into town, Rosalind joined them to finally figure out what happened to her sister. Strange, beautiful, and intriguing, the girls are closed off from the world, but they welcome Rosalind into their fold, deepening the fascination with their unique bond. As it turns out, the 6 girls were brought together by a force more sinister than Rosalind's nightmares could have conjured up, Death himself. Death incarnate has spared the girls from untimely endings, and to pay for their lives, the girls have traveled the country reaping souls on his behalf. Now Rosalind must decide if finding closure is worth the price of striking the same deal. From the Queen of Macabre, Alexis Henderson, comes a gripping and haunting story about grief, girlhood, and how we reckon our choices in life when death comes knocking. So this book reminds me of Julie Chan is Dead by Leanne Zhang, although it's not about social media influencers. It's literally about people who are grim reapers. But I'm really enjoying it. As I said, this is my 3rd book by Alexis Henderson. I started this book on Wednesday, and I am on page 208, chapter 22, and this book should be easily be able to finish tonight. The next book that I'm reading, is The Shadow's Love. This is by my friend Anna from New Hampshire. She self-published her own book on Amazon last month, and I'm very excited for her debut. I would not be able to tell you what page I am on to mark my progress, however, because unfortunately, the pages in this book are not numbered, which makes it really hard for me to report my progress, but I would say I'm about 50% through, or maybe a little bit over 50%, and I should finish this by Thursday. The next book I picked up at the library yesterday is called Talk Radio by Ham Martin. This was on the local authors shelf at the library, and I have not started it yet. I'm going to start it today. The next book is called The Library of Lost and Found by Phaedra Patrick. This is my 2nd book by this author. The first book I read by her was called The Time Hop Coffee Shop, which I read last month and gave 5 stars to. This is a book about libraries in dealing with grief. I really like this author's writing style a lot. I think she really gets you immersed in the world. Currently, I am on chapter 21, Cake, page 194. The next book is another... I had to fix that pile before it tipped over. The next book is another book I picked up off the National Library reading shelf at the library yesterday or on Thursday. This book is called Public Library and Other Stories. It's a short story collection by Ali Smith, who writes a lot of other short story collections. Some of her other books are called Hotel World, The Whole Story and Other Stories, Girl Meets Boy, The Accidental, and The First Person and Other Stories. I started this book on Tuesday, and I am on page 75. The last couple of books that I'm reading right now are all rereads. The first book is a bind-up of the first 3 Anne of Green Gables books that I borrowed from Kathleen. I first started to read this series 2 years ago because one of my favorite Australian booktubers, Rachel Catherine, was reading it. And I also reread This Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune, which is set on Prince Edward Island. I finished Anne of Green Gables yesterday. Started Anne of Avonlea. I am on chapter 11 of Anne of Avonlea, page 303, which I don't know if I was reading the actual book of Anne of Avonlea that is not in a 3-book bind-up. I'm not sure where that would put me in the actual book. The next book I am rereading for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR is The 5-Star Weekend by Elin Hildenbrand. This is part of Elin Hildenbrand's Nantucket series. All of these romance books are set on the island of Nantucket near Cape Cod in Massachusetts. And I am excited to be reading this book again. I started it on April 18th, and I am on page 241. The final book I am rereading is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I first read this book in 2023, and this author was inspired by the TV show Schitt's Creek, specifically the character of Alexis Rose. That's who she based this character on. Her name is Piper. The guy's name is Brendan. So the reason why I decided to reread It Happened One Summer is because obviously the author based this book off of Schitt's Creek, and the actress who played Moira Rose, Catherine O'Hara, died last winter at 76, and she will be greatly missed. She was amazing. For those of you not familiar with Catherine O'Hara, she was not only in Schitt's Creek, but she was in Home Alone. She was in Beetlejuice, and she was in a lot of other movies from the 90s and early 2000s. And as I just said, she is greatly missed. I'm going to run through ratings of other books that I have returned to the library. Just let me get my papers out from under the stack. Okay. The first book I wanted to mention is The Bookwoman's Daughter by Kim Richards. This is the second book by this author that I have read after The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. And these are historical fictions about libraries and librarians that are set during like the 1800s, around the time when the Oregon Trail migration was happening. I gave this book 4.5 stars. The next book that I read was called The Ghostwriter by Julie Clark. This was a backlist TBR book from October 2025, which is a thriller book about a group of siblings solving the mystery of who killed their dad, who was a thriller author. So this book really reminded me of Ashley Winstead's release from last July, This Book Will Bury Me. Both of these books, The Ghostwriter and This Book Will Bury Me, got 4.5 stars. The next book is The Voice We Find. This is a new book that it's right over there. I forgot to bring it over. This is a romance book that focuses on a guy who is the guardian of his sister who lost her hearing in a car crash, and he falls in love with a woman who narrates audiobooks. So I love the disability representation for American Sign Language, because the character Gabby, who's deaf, she is in a community theater group, and she performs in her showcase, and she does ASL and dedicates her performance to her brother who helps her out. It's a very beautiful story. I gave it 5 stars. This author, Nicole Desi, is also another new author. The past couple of months, I have been finding hit after hit in the adult fiction section at my library. So I am very happy with all of the books that I have been reading, because I have introduced myself to so many new authors. The Voice We Find was on my Disability Pride TBR, which goes through all year, not just through Disability Pride Month. And another book that I read for that TBR that was by a new author to me was called Chronically Dolores, which is a book about a high schooler with irritable bowel syndrome, which I was introduced to this disorder through the movie Birds of America with Matthew Perry and Lauren Graham in it. Matthew Perry's character Maury plays a college professor with this disorder in this movie. And when me and Kathleen saw it for the first time last year, I had known nothing about what this disability was, and I found this book to be very informative. There's also good neurodivergent representation, because Dolores's friend has autism. And I gave Chronically Dolores and The Voice We Find 5 stars. The next book that I wanted to talk about is Where Have All the Birds Gone? I picked this up in the YA section for the Earth Day books, and it's basically about birds and their migration patterns, which is always interesting to learn about. And another book I recently read that I really liked is called Big Driver by Stephen King, which is part of an anthology series of Stephen King books called All Dark, No Stars. And I picked up Big Driver because it was mentioned in a YouTube video that I watched about Seinfeld fan theories. And the fan theory the book was mentioned in, basically says that Seinfeld is connected to Stephen King's Dark Tower universe because the Hamptons episode where George and Elaine and Kramer and Jerry all go to the Hamptons for the weekend is mentioned in that book. So if you love Seinfeld, pick up that book just for the reference of that episode. So that is my wrap up. Stay tuned on May 8th because our next From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR podcast episode will be out on Kathleen's channel at 6 a.m. And Matt and I have a new entertainment wrap up video coming out at some point during the weekend this weekend. We are still trying to iron out what time we're going to film. So thank you for tuning in. I hope everybody has a good week. I will see you guys this weekend when Matt and I wrap up our March and April entertainment. Have a great week.